Hi, I'm Kat Rosenfield.
And I'm Phoebe Maltz Bovy, and we are Feminine Chaos. Unusually feminine and especially chaotic on this fine afternoon.
I feel like we always say that we're especially chaotic, and then maybe we don't deliver.
I don't know, but I think this is it. This is going to be an especially chaotic one. I'm not joking.
This is a fun one for sure.
Because we are going to cover some of the hard news today. No, well, sort of. We're going to start though with the question of so the big picture question is what happens when people go mega viral and sort of become memes for either things they did but that are sort of dubious consequence, or things they are imagined to have done. But more specifically, we're starting with a topic that Kat knows more about than I do, namely the cardboard cutout scandals, including a recent one. What is it? What is going on with cardboard cutouts?
So, cardboard cutouts in the news. In case anybody missed this, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Twitter called out Mitch McConnell over a photograph that was taken at an event called the Fancy Farm Picnic, which is, as you know, contrary to what I thought originally, is not a farm where the farmers all wear like evening gowns. Really,
I would have thought it's like one of these like farm to table, like where the food is like a farm, but the fancy stuff where it'd be like in the Union Square Green Market for like $15 per little potato or something.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Old MacDonald had a fancy farm, and and the animals all wore.
Oh, that song! I'm
sorry, but the point is that's not what this was. Fancy Farm Picnic is some kind of politically themed picnic. And so there was a photograph taken at this picnic that was posted on Instagram of a bunch of teenage boys wearing Team Mitch for Mitch McConnell t-shirts, doing distasteful things to a cardboard cutout of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. In one picture, they were all gathered around her, and one of the boys was kissing the cardboard cutout while all the other boys gave a thumbs down. And then in another one, there was a kid doing, I just realized that this is a video, so I can hold up my hand like this, holding his hand like he was miming choking the cutout. And so the headline was, group of teenage boys grope and choke a cardboard cutout of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And when she tweeted this picture at Mitch McConnell, she said, "Are you paying for young men to practice groping and choking members of Congress with your payroll?" Implying that these men worked for Mitch McConnell.
And that they were grown men.
Yeah, that they were grown men, and that they were members of some kind of like young Republicans sexual assault training camp. Which was not the case. But it turned into, maybe because it's August and this is, a slow news month, it turned into kind of a thing. It was in the headlines for a solid week. And you have some thoughts, Phoebe, I think.
I do have some thoughts.
The bigger context.
Well, I have some thoughts on the bigger context of that specific cardboard cutout incident, and far too many thoughts on the whole thing of these stories blowing up. I mean, I think in this context, so there was then a few days later, I think in Ohio, a man convicted, I believe, or at least accused, possibly, what did I put in my notes here?
Arrested.
Arrested, yes, for threatening the very same politician, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman, for threatening to kill her. So, and there had been just before this, obviously, you can't, context, has to be things from before. There was, Trump and the so-called squad and that whole situation there, which is, yes, viewers, I am indeed a Democrat. And I even live in Canada, even worse. But basically, these are politicians who are sort of baseline, both very celebrated by some and very hated on the right. So to me, this seemed like miming choking. I could see why it was an unusual case. However, is they're in high school, they're joking around, they're not actually, it's very different from, it is not, it's like, it takes a very, very big umbrella definition of political violence to get there, I think. Something like that.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that really bothered me in the aftermath of this controversy, and it bothered me because I too am on the left, and I live in the U.S., Democrat, but that it made people on the left look really dumb. That there was a lot of this kind of slippery slope argument being made that if nobody condemned these young men for groping a cardboard cutout of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, it was going to be only a matter of time. The next thing you know, one of them is going to be groping a real woman, not made of cardboard, perhaps not a politician, but somebody else, which is just an astronomically ridiculous argument. And I thought it was interesting on 2 points. For the first part, groping cardboard cutouts is actually, surprisingly, something that people of all ages and genders and political stripes really enjoy doing. And
wait, which was that other, although, do you think it's women politicians whose cardboard cutouts are disproportionately groped?
No.
Wasn't that Hillary Clinton?
There was one, but okay, so here's the fun thing. I was up really late at night and went down an Instagram rabbit hole into the cardboard boyfriend hashtag, which led me into some other hashtags. And I discovered that there's an entire category out there of photographs of people grabbing the crotch of a cardboard cutout of Donald Trump. This is like a thing that people really enjoy doing.
I would not enjoy doing that.
I mean,
I mean, some people.
Some people.
Hashtag not all people. I didn't sleep a lot at all. So, pardon that. Yeah.
And I don't think that, I mean, if you asked any one of these people, and I'm just going to assume, that this doesn't necessarily convey anything except disrespect for the person portrayed, which of course in a country that is founded on free expression and where, we do protect this kind of speech, that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so that was interesting to me. The other thing that was interesting to me was that this is all happening at the same time as Kathy Griffin was back in the news talking about that incident where she did a photo shoot holding up a replica of the severed head of Donald Trump. And I do think, if we believe that should be protected speech, and I do, and we expected Trump to suck it up and not freak out about it, which he did. He tried to get his Justice Department to go after her for that, and they wanted to bring her in handcuffs and a jumpsuit to make an example of her, which is completely inappropriate. But if we think that's inappropriate, I think that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, using her platform and her position of power and privilege as a congresswoman to call out private citizens for also protected speech, should maybe register as similarly inappropriate.
Well, I think in terms of protected speech, I mean, I think where I keep landing on this one is that it's a lot like many of these things we've discussed on this podcast, where it seems like there's this like missing space for just like saying that something's bad, but not saying that it's the worst thing to have ever happened. And I feel like it's a fantasy world that somebody could do that even in like late high school, say, because they don't look to be 14. Maybe they're 14. I don't know. They look like 17 or so, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, they're like that. We know they're high school students. That's
right. High school students. It seems hard to imagine a world in which that would not be like looked upon disfavorably by like a potential employer or a college or something like that. And I think imagining that actions, given that like your grades in high school matter, clearly your actions in high school are fair game for certain things. I think, yeah, it gets tricky though when it is like a call out on that scale. And then I think it's just,
and coming from an elected official too, I think that changes things.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just this, there's too many layers of awfulness. Like there's the climate in which she may feel genuinely under threat because she is, and I think that's the level of threat against her is probably unusual, I would think, for a congressperson, I would imagine. I don't know how many there are people who've been arrested for plotting to kill them that same week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's hard for me to know. I sympathize with her being upset about it. I also think there's something about the fact that they're in high school that seems like that aspect of it just seems sort of like it's like the consequence, like there should be consequences, but they should be kind of high school student consequences. And then this always becomes, but think about all the high school students who are not treated with such concern. And it's like, no, I think all high school students should be treated with concern, not just those ones who I don't feel any particular affinity or sympathy towards. I just think they are high school students, basically, and that high school students goofing off is not like, the common sense interpretation of that is it's high school students goofing off, being awful, but in a sort of high school studenty way.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not willing to even go quite that far in condemning them or suggesting that they should have, there should be consequences because they, took a rude picture with a cardboard cutout, which is something that a lot of people do. I guess, it's true that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez probably experiences more than the normal share of pushback or harassment for somebody in her position. At the same time, as somebody in her position, I think it probably, once you're an elected official, if you've sought that position and you're given it, it behooves you to make a distinction between people who are genuinely threatening you or genuinely harassing you and a group of kids who took a picture with a cardboard facsimile of you and did not treat it with the reverence that you might think it deserved.
Well, I think what this kind of another whole angle on this maybe is just that with Trump and the tweeting and the inane tweeting that constantly will get quote tweeted into any Twitter thread, whether you want to see it or not. There's always a screenshot possibility, even if you mute him, which I don't bother doing. But basically, the question then of like how to defeat Trump becomes, do you use his tools or do you use different ones? And this is the kind of like celebrity Twitter version of like, and not that she's a celebrity, but you know what I mean? Like the sort of fighting back with the same sort of like soundbite type approach.
Yeah.
And I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I don't know. I find it all a little bleak, but.
Yes. If there's one way that Donald Trump's presidency has perhaps permanently altered the landscape of politics and the way that politicians talk and engage with the public, I think it's this. I think that the bar has been lowered for what kind of sort of aggressive rudeness, I guess, is a good word to use. Yeah. Crudeness, doing things that are going to rile people up and doing them because they're going to rile people up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, to me, like it all just seems like a lot of, in every direction, bad things. As I said, I'm fine with them facing some consequences. I'm not fine with, like the boys in the photo, I'm not fine with them being like permanent record, unemployable, shunned, sent to Devil's Island, Dreyfus style, basically. But there, was there any, and there was, this also reminded me of another story, though, that had been in the news about and this was some thread, I don't even know, it was some woman with a gazillion Twitter followers, writer, maybe comedy writer, who tweeted about her sons watching YouTube. Oh, right.
Yes.
The YouTube comedy.
Yeah, YouTube, YouTube comedians.
Not us on YouTube. Or maybe we are the problem on YouTube. Who knows?
Yeah, but it was.
Probably not.
Right. It was that YouTube was laying the groundwork in this really nefarious, subtle, and seductive way to draw young men who are too dumb or too unaware of nuance, I guess, to pick up on it, it's going to seduce them into the alt-right. They're laying the groundwork.
And that the solution is to sit with your teenage son and have him watch like sort of 2007 era Comedy Central or something. I don't remember what the...
Well, she had a list of approved comedians, and but this was a fascinating thread to me.
Wait, sorry, is our connection, does it sound strange to you, the connection?
It sounds good to me.
Okay, so the recording's probably fine.
Okay. Okay.
No, sorry. The connection was a little weird, but I think it's okay.
Okay. But yeah, she had like a multi-step plan. She's like, I'm going to tell you how to prevent, YouTube comedians from seducing your white teenage sons into the alt-right under your nose. And, one of the things which I picked out because it was really funny to me, she said, sit down with them and explain why triggered is not a joke. Explain how serious PTSD triggers really are. And there was something about that in particular. It's like, sit down with them and explain why jokes aren't funny, why these jokes they're laughing at aren't funny. That reminded me of being maybe 13 years old and having some well-meaning, but I think ultimately pretty clueless adult sitting me down and being like, I know what Beavis and Butthead say, but lighting things on fire is actually no laughing matter. And
oh my goodness. I feel like I was just in a shoe store and there were some sneakers in the sale rack that had a picture of Beavis and Butthead on them, unless I dreamt this or something. It reminded me of this. I think so. Oh, there's a lot. It's like the Friends t-shirts on young people. But also it reminded me of this health columnist for the Times who would always write about her two, by then, well into adulthood sons, and saying, and my sons have never, never had a drink, never smoked a cigarette, this, that. And it's like, how on earth does she think she knows this stuff about these men who are now, oh no, you froze.
Oh, I know.
You're back.
I was holding very still.
Sure. Impressively so, yes. I don't know, it just seemed like this whole notion of like the amount of control somebody would think they have over their children. Then there's also like I feel like sharing about your own children, identifiable children in this way always squicks me out. Like, let them just, like, if you want to discuss their YouTube habits, do that with them, maybe not via Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I'm sure the kids in question were mortified.
Exactly. It's like the Princeton mom and all these different like stories with it. Like, just, I allow my infant to watch this YouTube. No YouTube, this infant. But I'm just saying, like, I think you can just like not, this is the option to not have it all be like a show,
I think that we maybe, and maybe this may be why it always becomes this public thing, that we are in the midst of a little bit of a moral panic right now, about, with moms particularly freaking out about their sons particularly being seduced into a part of politics that they don't agree with. And I don't know. I mean, I think that where I come down on this is that there's always been this kind of counterculture that springs up in response to whatever kids perceive is the social and political norm, and whatever they perceive is going to, reduce their uptight parents to a quivering pile of goo. So that in this case, they may have very well figured out that the thing that gets their parents really freaked out is anything alt-right or Republican adjacent. And I know that there is a counter argument that like the stakes are higher than ever, and this really is dangerous in a way that things like Beavis and Butthead or, Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to go even further back, were not. But I don't know. I guess I'm skeptical that we're really in such end times that we need to be freaking out about kids watching YouTube.
It seemed like the wrong approach altogether. Even if she's freaked out for a good reason, it seems like playing it all out on Twitter. No, don't do that. Don't do that. But we have so many topics. I need to shuffle us onto the, so cardboard cutout, groping onto the question of another incident where somebody went viral for, once again, the cardboard cutout thing, it's like possibly not as big of a deal as some might think. This one is it's a story, there is more to it sort of story.
Right, where the person in question was treated like a cardboard cutout, but was in fact a three-dimensional. Did I do this right?
Yes. I think that's a good. I was like grasping for. I was groping for a transition there, and not.
You were groping.
Yeah, grope. I was intentional groping for the transition. Yeah. So what's this? This was a story from a little bit ago, but Kathy Young just wrote about it in. I think this is the first time I've ever been on this website, The Bulwark. Which I can't really say anything about it because I didn't know it before.
Oh, but I think I know what The Bulwark is. It's a conservative publication that sprang up to be, I think, specifically anti-Trump.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Well,
I think if I got that wrong, like, all apologies.
Well, this is not about Trump. This one, it's about Sarah Brush, a Yale grad student who went viral for telling a fellow Yale grad student, I believe, a black woman, to not sleep in some lounge at Yale.
She called the police on her. Yes. It was the napping.
It was the campus police at Yale, and she is white herself, Sarah Brush. And obviously calling the police on somebody for napping in a campus lounge seemed like about the most ridiculous thing to do. So this went very, very, very viral with like how, like that this was sort of the emblematic instance of like a sort of the obvious, like, what other explanation but racism? Plus, at Yale, mm-hmm. anything that's happening at Yale is going to make the news, even if it's like somebody has a paper cut at Yale. So, but then I guess, so there's more to it. Whether the more to it entirely changes everything is another question. But it's certainly, I guess, the more to it, I guess, to sort of, there's a lot of, I don't know how much of the play-by-play of the whole thing, but basically she's somebody who, for a mix of reasons that sort of add up and others having to do with, others that basically don't, was very, very afraid at the time and assumed she was paranoid basically at the time. Yeah.
So she was living completely alone on the 12th floor of this dorm.
And she was significantly older than other students, right? Yes. At Yale probably.
Right. So
it seemed like it seems like Yale screwed up perhaps there, putting somebody
Yes.
in that living situation who already was baseline having some problems. To put them in that living situation seems like, I lived in an undergrad dorm for like half a year as a grad student in Paris because it was the way I could live for free in Paris, and why not? But it was weird, even if you're feeling fine. If you're a grad student in a dorm, can already be a little.
Yeah, and this had been the case for like 3 years. She'd been having conflicts with other people, other undergrads, I guess, who were in her dorm, where they were being loud and she wasn't happy about that. And this was not the first time that she'd had contact with the campus police or with the campus housing authorities trying to resolve issues related to being unhappy with where she lived.
Right.
And she also, I thought this was interesting that she's a woman who's clearly had a really traumatic life. Like she lost like her entire family. She was raised in a really stridently religious household, and there's just a lot going on there. So the idea that she was sort of the living embodiment of hoity-toity white feminist privilege, calling the police on her Black fellow student, missed a lot of context that you can think it's relevant or not, but we didn't know about it. And I think that's what's interesting to me about this story is this happened like last year. And nobody took the time to find out what was going on there until now. This is the first that we're hearing about any of this. And insofar as anybody dug into her background, they only did it to try and find support for a thesis that had already been formed, that she was a vile racist and did this for vile racist reasons.
Because she'd written something like problematic about headscarves or something at one point, I think.
Yeah, I think she'd been working in Tunisia, I think, or I don't know, maybe I'm getting this wrong, but she'd been working in the Muslim communities to help women there.
And she was basically like a very common French but not American feminist view on this.
Right.
Like, I mean, I guess this story, so there were a couple things about it that struck me. So I'm not sure that even with all this information, the initial takeaway ceases to hold. I think there's just more takeaways, maybe. I think the specific instance of calling the campus police on the specific other napping student still strikes me as inappropriate. And whether or not it was racially motivated is hard for me to pinpoint, because if she claims she didn't even see who the person was, I don't know. But it seems what I thought was really interesting about this story is just this question of these sort of intersecting victimhoods, basically. So mental illness, right, is often came up in this story, but often comes up, I think, in these stories where people go viral for one breakdown or another in public. And when somebody has really, really lost it in public, it's not always so pretty. And sometimes they say things that happen to line up with something that the zeitgeist is kind of on, and sometimes it doesn't. But when it does, like the guy in the bagel shop who is short and not getting dates and complaining about a bagel shop, maybe he's having some sort of nervous breakdown, although apparently he's trying to monetize this now. Whatever. The point is, well, there's a lot of strange things happening online, but the question is, like, does that, if somebody is, not making sense because they're not well, but it happens to express itself in a way that's also, that if they were more with it would be very offensive, like, where do you fall on that? And then that, and this whole question of women's safety, right? Which I think was when Kathy Young in it linked to a thread I did about, I think it was about that. Anyway. But yeah, this whole question of women feeling unsafe is both in our current cultural moment, the most sacred feeling a woman can have that should not be questioned under any circumstances, and potentially like white lady having a stupid fit about nothing.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. We have all of these stories and first-person narratives from women who say that they live in constant fear. They're afraid to go out at night. They're afraid to be at home alone. And Sarah Brush, more than almost any of these other women, really strikes me as somebody who, even if she didn't necessarily express that in an essay, that's actually how she lives. She actually is that person. She's very, very fearful. And has, it seemed like, sort of histrionic reactions to perceived instances of being under threat or feeling persecuted that I think, unfortunately, can bring out the worst in people. There was some question of, were her attempts to keep herself safe being so poorly received that people wanted instead to provoke her, which is an ugly thing that people shouldn't do, but it happens.
It happens, but I guess I could not figure out from really anything I've read about this, what was that, like, you should feel bad for her because she's clearly unwell, or what was this thing happened to her because of the sort of narrator reliability sorts of questions, if that makes sense. Like, either way, it seems like she's been in a bad spot, but whether it, I couldn't tell if it didn't seem like she was really being harassed necessarily. It seemed more like she felt.
Right.
And something else. And then it can be that everybody was kind of in the wrong, you know what I mean?
But it's interesting. I mean, this is a case where a woman says, I felt harassed. And contrary to how I think it often plays out in situations like this, everyone's saying, well, we don't care, or we don't agree that that's reasonable. And that's interesting to me. I don't know really where to come down.
Yeah, well, it's this that. Weaponized, the sort of like, is it weaponizing the like white tears? Is it this? And I guess I think that what happens, my off the cuff theory on this, is that because of this sort of untenable treating of feeling like a victim as sacred for all women, there's been necessary pushback saying, no, actually, like, if you're a white woman walking down the street and you see a black man 3 blocks away and you feel scared, no, that is not sacred fear that everybody needs to respect. In fact, no, you're just being racist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like what was so tricky with this situation is it takes some of those dynamics, but also with this sort of extra elements, several extra elements. And my thinking is that Yale should not have put her in that living situation to begin with. And that Yale is at fault, but that at way earlier than any of this.
Yeah.
I think that was an odd place to put her.
Yeah. I mean, I think that maybe my takeaway from this is not that Sarah Brush was in the right and shouldn't have suffered consequences, or shouldn't have been judged for calling the police on her classmate. I think that it's really the fact that we didn't get the whole story until this long after the fact, because the way that these stories play out right now is to identify, a bad guy and be like, hey, look how bad this person is. And, I mean, that's a very online thing that we're going to talk about more in a second. But I think for journalists to participate in that, especially professionally, when you're writing a story and that's literally your story, is look how bad this person is, and here's additional proof that they've always been bad. When it's just one individual person who did one individual thing, I don't know. I wonder about where we're at in terms of the industry overall, where so much news is that kind of thing. Obviously, it gets clicks, but at what cost?
Well, for sure. So this is a perfect segue to a case that I find entirely unambiguous, and I'm going to not be the nuance advocate here because I don't see any nuance to this story at all. This is the story of I wrote this down somewhere. Christian Girl Autumn, a meme. Okay. Now there has been a meme online, something hot girl summer. I once Googled it and I couldn't figure out the whole point, but people are saying that they're having a hot girl summer and putting like hot pictures of themselves. And it all has to do with something that I assume I'm like 20 years too old to understand.
I was going to say summer is over. So I guess,
it's hot in my apartment, hot Toronto apartment summer. We can make that its own meme.
Hot middle-aged woman summer.
Exactly. Not hot flashes yet, but not that far. But yeah. So some meme, somebody from an account that looked to be of a young woman, although it turned out to be of a 19-year-old male college student, white male it looks to be, which is relevant here. And you will see why, said something like, move over, hot girl summer, now it's Christian Girl Autumn, and illustrated this with a picture of 2 smiling young they appear to be white women with very voluminous styled hair and these big grins, a lot of makeup, fashionable but sort of, not how to put this.
Blanket scarves, skinny jeans, ankle boots, like just full on,
And matching Celine, was it some sort of designer purses? Matching.
I would not know.
I think it said so in the article.
Oh.
Or one of the things I read about it. They looked fancy, and then I think the article said it's... Anyway. Basically, very basic looking. It turns out the picture was from 3 years ago. They no longer dress like this. Oh, God forbid. I mean, I'm like wearing a shirt from probably more than 3 years ago here, but so the point is people responded on Twitter to this photo very angrily at this. The women were not named. There's just this picture that somebody had found online. Okay. And I'm going to just read some of the responses, like how it went. Okay. One was, this picture thinks Africa is a country and is going on a mission trip there in 2020. Another, this picture showed up drunk at a gay bar at 2 a.m. and yelled homophobic slurs at the bouncer. And then a third, this picture just asked for my regional manager's phone number and customer services number. Okay, so these were things that people tweeted about a photograph of two unnamed but real women. Now, this just drove me up the wall, this whole thing, because there are people who do bad things, who are racist, homophobic, and at inappropriate times demand to speak to managers. These are two random women who are real people. What? They
didn't do any of this stuff.
And so they went incredibly viral, and then BuzzFeed, so back to being a journalism story, for better or worse, I guess, dug into it, found the women. And one detail that I found very telling, okay, so this is from the BuzzFeed article. The meme is the handiwork of a 19-year-old named Giovanni, the Long Island, New York college student who didn't want to give his last name for privacy reasons, told BuzzFeed News he spends his time making jokes on troll Twitter, unquote, troll Twitter. He wants his own privacy.
Yeah. Oh, how nice. That he got to keep his privacy.
And like, what? Like this, and also, everybody's hating these two women for what? Well, what do we know about them? Pretty much, they're white. Well, Giovanni strikes me as being similarly pale. Why is he? Well, he has kind of a more alternative look, or maybe he's not a woman. Is that perhaps?
I don't know. I mean, it might be, but I don't think we should indulge in the same sin.
No, but I'm saying I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why he thinks. It's like I'm wondering why people who are no less white than the women in the picture would think somehow. Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole thing, the whole pile-on just struck me as very, it's so ridiculous and like there are all these cases where it's ambiguous what somebody's done. Maybe it was offensive, maybe not. Maybe it was taken out of context. There's no context. This is just a random picture of two real women. And people just had this field day projecting all of this stuff.
It turns into like a party where everyone's trying to out-mean each other.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I guess, I mean, there were a few aspects of this that bothered me. One was just like, should real people be memes? No, is my vote there. Real people should not be memes, especially real people who haven't even done anything other than not look hipster enough. I mean, that was the thing. Another is just this sort of like, if you think it's excusable, why is it excusable? And it's like, well, because I don't know. It's like, there's no way, basically. There's no sort of, I don't think there's any rationale that makes sense. But then there's also just this specific question of women who look like they would want to speak to a manager. And I really, really, really want to talk about that. I don't know if you have.
I mean, I know you have thoughts on this, and
thoughts on this, even though I like never do it and probably should more. But
yeah,
managers.
I mean, I'm trying to think if I've ever asked to speak to a manager, and I'm sure that maybe I have. And so what's interesting about that as like a kind of a meme bad behavior to me is that on the rare occasion when I've wanted to talk to someone in charge, it hasn't been because I was trying to like exert power over some lowly customer service representative and to make them feel small and bad or to get them in trouble. It's because you're powerless and they're powerless, and you have a problem that you need to address, and you know that they don't have the authority to do that for you. So rather than wasting everyone's time, you go up the chain to the person who can actually help you. I mean, that's literally what it is. It's like, I'd like to talk to somebody who can help me, often because the manager is the one who can maybe bend the rules or, you know, make an exception or whatever. So I do think it's a strange thing to take personally. And
it's just, yeah, I don't know.
And to identify as universally bad when women do it.
Well, that's the aspect of it that really strikes me. So I have, while I have had plenty of other jobs as well, the one that I've had most recently and where this type of thing has come up is like when teaching, somebody might ask to speak to the chair if they want an explanation of their grade or something. So I understand the dynamic and why, if you are the person lower down on the chain, you would feel you're not happy, right? If somebody, even if you know you're in the right, whatever, you know, it's not a good day, right? I get that. But the question is, like, there's been, I guess I just think this again, it's actually kind of coming full circle topic-wise, but like, you think about like lean in and all of this sort of pressure on women to assert themselves more and to, you know, like speak up if there's a problem. But now there's this whole meme, and there's this great thread about this meme by a writer who I think goes by Abbott, but her handle is Karen Abbott, about sort of the Karen meme about sort of middle-aged women who make a fuss.
Yes, that's a really good thread.
Who don't care. It's amazing. I really recommend this thread. But like, where this sort of under the cover of like speaking up for either customer service workers or who even knows, there's this kind of like, anytime a middle-aged woman makes a fuss about something, middle-aged white woman especially, that like, oh, you know, and it's just like, I mean, I guess the question is, do middle-aged, so in that thread, this writer writes that middle-aged, sort of like that their male equivalents surely try to speak to managers too. My theory is that men are just not in these situations as much, and that women are dealing more frequently with the sorts of things where this would even come up in these situations. And that men might just be kind of respected more automatically in these situations when they're in them than women are, and that maybe asking to speak to the manager is far from being a power move, sort of like nobody's listening to you, so you're speaking up. I just don't think it's an unambiguous case of, you little guy, I want you, you know, that's actually the name of a dog in my building, little guy. I'm reminded, I'm suddenly picturing this Yorkie. Like, I want you fired, Yorkie. No, a very lovely dog. But yeah, anyway, I've completely lost my thought about this, but I guess I just think that this notion that speaking up in these situations where I feel like my whole life I have not spoken up enough and have tried to like painstakingly train myself to speak up. And now there's this meme, like I'm aging into the meme where like if I do speak up, it's like a cliche. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is interesting how a lot of this behavior that gets stigmatized can actually end up being a sort of a Trojan horse for just hating on middle-aged white ladies.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And that's,
we've talked about this in various forms before. And I always wonder, is it just like people just resent their moms? You know, they're just trying to kind of work through that.
I think online. It could be. I mean, I think it's this notion that women who are not, you know, like incredibly hot 20-year-olds basically shouldn't exist, but it's not sort of politically correct to say that. So instead you get this kind of, oh, it's very problematic. Any feminism from prior to the year 2018 is just too problematic, and all of like that whole thing. I think it fits, like we've talked about this before. I think it fits kind of with that, like that all older women, and maybe you can add like when you're saying, oh, older, it's just white women, but like clearly there's a sort of overall misogyny in there that kind of creeps in, and it's like, I don't know. I think sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes people are ridiculous and complain about stupid things. And I've worked in a coffee shop. I know it can happen, but
this is where we have to both like trot out our bona fides. Yes. I've worked in service. I was a waitress for years and years.
I mean, honestly, like I feel like I could list jobs I've had, but really, like the whole thing where somebody wants to speak to your chair about a grade is like, oh, that's the thing, though. It's like it's frustrating because I get it, but they have the right to do that, and it's probably not personal. Yeah.
I was wondering how often that works, or can you not say?
I mean, in my experience, these things are pretty like mathematical, like, mm-hmm. And this was many years ago, like when I was in grad school, and I remember, I think it's just like either a student, like if a student's grade was added up correctly, their grade was added up correctly kind of thing. So it wouldn't be like a whole like holistic assessment of their performance in the class. It's like looking at the grades or not. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm sure in history people have had grades change like that. I'm not sure I'm aware of this ever happening.
Right. Cool. Speaking of super hot 20-year-olds.
Yes. Although she's probably pretty old by now. She's ancient by now. She's probably all of like 25 by now.
Oh, Emily Ratajkowski?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'll be the one to go on the record and say that I don't think super hot 20-year-olds should exist.
Oh. Just get rid of them.
Thanos them. Snap your fingers, get them gone.
I was going to say except for Harry Styles, but then I think he's actually like also not 20 anymore. So he can be middle-aged with the rest of us. Yeah. Emily. Okay.
Emily Ratajkowski.
Okay, so I think this will probably be our last topic for today, but it's a good one.
Mm-hmm. And it includes a conspiracy theory that I'm really excited to share with.
Why don't you start with the conspiracy theory? Because I fear that we will somehow miss it and not get to the conspiracy theory.
Okay. Well,
this is the week's best conspiracy theory. It's been a week of many conspiracy theories, but when Kat told me her conspiracy theory here, I was like, oh.
Forget all those other conspiracy theories. This one is going to blow your hair back.
It is.
Okay.
Your hair. Which hair?
Okay. So, in Harper's Bazaar, Emily Ratajkowski, who you may know from her role in Gone Girl.
Or in the Blurred Lines music video.
Right. Very problematic now.
Yes.
She's a model. She is in her, we're going to say mid-20s, probably mid to late 20s. Wrote an essay. Said the headline is Emily Ratajkowski explores what it means to be hyperfeminine. And this essay is accompanied by a picture of Emily Ratajkowski, looking beautiful, wearing a bralette
that she designs.
Oh, it's one of hers. Okay.
Or I don't know if she designs it, but whatever. Yeah, her company.
Holding her arm up over her head to display an absolutely astonishingly robust thatch of armpit hair. And in the essay, as she's, talking about beauty standards, she says, sometimes letting my body hair grow out is what makes me feel sexy. And I was very curious about this statement and the accompanying photo, because, among other things, the armpit hair on display in this picture, having watched a YouTube video of a time lapse of armpit hair growing, I can now say with authority was at least a month's worth of not shaving. Okay. And this woman is a model. And I thought, does she really sometimes let her body hair grow out for a month? Like, maybe she did it just to take this picture, but does she ever do this? So I went onto her Instagram and I scrolled back further than I care to admit. And what I found is lots and lots of pictures of Emily Ratajkowski holding her arms up over her head. Absolutely no evidence anywhere of a single armpit hair. Like, I'm not convinced that she can even grow it. I think that maybe she's had it all lasered off. So my conspiracy theory, get ready for this, is that in her Harper's Bazaar photo shoot, she's wearing an armpit merkin.
I know we have more on this topic, but I'm just like, when Kat messaged me armpit merkin, I was like, wow, why not?
I think
so too.
Yeah.
I mean, the article though, it is okay. So, I mean, what jumped out about it at me first, apart from the bralette, the armpit hair, fine, whatever, and also the fact that there had just been also a New York Times style article where some bralette designer referred to bralettes as like having really come into their own as part of the Me Too movement. Like you're really repelling those men by wearing a bralette without a shirt over it specifically. So like wearing a little bra with no shirt over it to really show the patriarchy what anyway. But so she has in the article, which is, so this is kind of her thing is sort of like, instead of like sex positive feminism, it's like looking really sexy positive feminism. That's kind of been her thing for a while. And this is not her first foray into that, sort of argumentation, but she then has this aside early in the piece. It's, before I go any further, let's state the obvious. I'm a cis white woman. I'm well aware of the privilege I receive as someone who is heteronormative, and I don't pretend to act like my identity hasn't made some things easier for me. Now, I, as a connoisseur of the privilege disclaimer in feminist essays, was like, screenshot, but also, whoa, she's completely, it reminded me of where there was something with the college admissions scandal where this, I think, got written up, possibly this was a Quillette thing, where like somebody very, like the child of very famous parents was like, I grew up upper middle class or something. Yeah, sure. This supermodel is a cis white heteronormative woman. She's also a freaking supermodel. Oh my goodness. Like, it just seemed like there was this kind of point being missed there.
Is your identity as a cis hetero white woman the thing that's made your life easier, or is it the fact that you're stunningly beautiful on a level that most human beings can only dream of attaining?
Exactly. I mean, she was in that. Well, so what this also made me think about though is, so that she was in that movie I Feel Pretty with Amy Schumer, which I did eventually watch, admittedly on Netflix, on my phone while nursing over the course of like maybe 3 weeks. So I don't know how much profundity I have on that topic, but what I would say about it is I think we've talked about possibly the feedback it got about how it's like problematic because Amy Schumer, how dare she play the sort of plain looking person when she's a cis heteronormative, relatively slim white woman, whatever it was. But the whole gist of the movie is, I think, there are the people in this world who look like supermodels and the people who don't, and that is also a meaningful divide. And I feel like dividing, like just listing these identity categories without sort of acknowledging that there is also sort of supermodel versus not supermodel is kind of weirdly missing a common sense element of how the world is. But I think what I wish the essay would have been about is that it isn't necessarily privileged to be that beautiful. Probably is. It probably does pose problems sometimes. I mean, if you're somebody making a ton of money off of it, probably fewer problems than for somebody else. But I don't know if it's posing problems for her, maybe. But I don't know. It's just the whole. It had this, like, there was a lot going on in this essay. I'm going to give another quote from it. I feel powerful when I'm feeling myself, and sometimes feeling myself means wearing a miniskirt. Sometimes it means wearing a giant hoodie and sweats. Sometimes I feel particularly strong and free when I don't wear a bra under a tank top. That's just me in that moment.
Okay.
Now, Kat, do you think that that's something that As a feminist insight, how would you rank it?
I had no idea that I was feministing so well, because I too sometimes don't wear a bra under a tank top. Not to, titillate the hell out of our audience or anything. But, I just had no idea that it was such a feminist statement to sometimes wear slouchy clothes and other times to not wear slouchy clothes.
Everything she said in that paragraph, I too could relate to. And I never would have thought of it as anything remotely political. The only thing it reminded me of is that Taylor Swift line, like, I can't sing, I wouldn't even start. Like, I wear short skirts, she wears short skirts. I wear t-shirts. It seems a little like it reminded me of that, but I just was wondering, what is the message of this article? It was like, it's feminist, and then people seem to really respond positively to it online. I was looking, and it seemed like it's kind of, people are like, yeah, you tell them. But like, what's the problem? Like, I had a lot of trouble telling, what the issue was. Like, I guess part of it also was that she kept using the word femme, which, as I understand it, from people I know who are not as heteronormative as this particular supermodel, it's kind of like a queer specific term, and it's not like, oh no, she should be thought policed for using the wrong word, but like, if it's stigmatized for her to be sort of conventionally feminine, like, how exactly, like, explain it? I don't know.
Right. I mean, maybe she's using femme because she actually does consider herself to be a member of the queer community in the same way that Miley Cyrus does. It's entirely possible.
Oh boy, this could be.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about Miley Cyrus, who's separated from Liam Hemsworth. Just, there's your little gossip tidbit. It's very sad.
I mean, when I'm up nights, it's for that reason.
Mourning Miley Cyrus's all too brief marriage.
Absolutely. That, or pondering the authenticity of body hair in fashion magazines.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm not doing that, I'm, scrolling Instagram looking at pictures of people grabbing cardboard Donald Trump's junk. So,
I mean, I mostly use Instagram for looking at pictures of poodles, and now I'm wondering a lot about the fur on some of these poodles, and
oh my God, poodle merkins.
Could be.
Wow.
It could be. It certainly could.
Well, this went to a sort of a strange place.
It did, but why not? As well it should. I think that's all I've got. Did you have further?
I think I was done at poodle merkins.
Perfect. All right. Well, this has been
feminine chaos.
I think for sure it has. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.